We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history.
Good Friday morning to afternoon. You're on the broadcast Faith on the Front Line. I'm Dr. Lewis Logan, joined by my co-host, Reverend William Campbell.
Greetings and good morning.
We are here with Faith on the Front Line, welcoming you and thanking you so much for tuning in. And we pray that this broadcast of Open Mic will be an opportunity today. Our format is just a little different. We want to engage with you, those of you who are listening perhaps, or who want to engage in conversation about some concerns that you have, thoughts or perspectives that you'd like to express. We want to open up the mic and get to meet you. It's one thing to have guests on and talk about issues that we're concerned about and we think that you might be concerned about, but we'll also want to establish relationships with you, listen to you, hear what your concerns are, that will help to impact our programming and our productions as we move forward. Our objective is to establish meaningful relationships, mutually beneficial relationships. We'd like to learn from you, and we'd like to also be a source of information for you as well. We're going to give props out to our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. We want to open up the mic and encourage you to call 323-473-3100. That's 323-473-3100. Again, Dr. Lewis Logan, thank you so much for streaming, and for viewing us over the internet and viewing us and listening to us. We pray that you will take advantage of this opportunity to get to know me, get to know Pastor Campbell, and for us to get to know you. Again, the number is 323-473-3100. If you prefer to email or hit me up on Facebook or even Twitter, my email address is praxis@gmail.com, Praxis @gmail.com, or you can Facebook me at Lewis E. Logan II, or you can also tweet a brother. Tweet me at Dr. Lewis Logan, hashtag and Dr. Lewis Logan, and you can get me and we'll relay your questions, comment on your comments, or whatever it is that you would like to say to us. Thank you so much. Giving props to our sponsors, and we'll be right back. If you're like me, it's lunchtime. And I want to thank our sponsors, the Faith on Frontline radio broadcast, in the form of Uncle Daryl's Cajun Cuisine at 2560 Lincoln Boulevard, Marina Del Rey, and also Doolin's on Crenshaw, that soul food restaurant owned by Greg Doolin, my good friend and brother, 4859 Crenshaw Boulevard, right here in Los Angeles, California. We want to thank them for being our special sponsors for Faith on the Front Line. I want to encourage all my Faith on the Front Line listeners, if you're hungry, if you want seafood, Uncle Daryl's Cajun Cuisine is the place to go, right there at 2560 Lincoln Boulevard on the corner of Lincoln and Washington Boulevard. And if you want some soul food and you know you're not on a diet but need to be, but you're willing to skip it just for a quick second, I'd encourage you to go to Doolin's right there on Crenshaw Boulevard, 4859. Greg will take care of you. His wonderful staff will smile at you, and they will pile it on. I'm telling you, it's ridiculous. Good food, good cuisine. Thank you for being our sponsors. Faith on the Frontline family, go and support Uncle Daryl's and Doolin's. Thank you so much. Faith on the Frontline listeners, this is Dr. Lewis Logan, your executive producer, giving thanks and props to one of our sponsors, United We Ship, 877-229-0577. That's 877-229-0577. Any shipping logistical needs you may have, whether it's a small letter or larger parcel or whatever it is you need. Michelle Israel and the professional staff of United We Ship will take care of all of your shipping needs. They're going toe-to-toe with the big boys, UPS and FedEx, and they're going to make it happen nationwide through their network of shipping logistics capacity. They are sponsors of Faith on the Frontline, and I highly recommend that you call Michelle Israel at 877-229-0577 for any of your shipping needs. They are special sponsors of Faith on the Frontline. He stepped out on faith, and let's step up and support him. Thank you.
Young people going to stand up real quick. Come on. Come on, we gotta stand.
And we're back, Faith on the Frontline family. Thank you so much to our sponsors again, and I hope that you will take advisement seriously and engage those businesses in supporting whatever needs you have, culinary and professional shipping logistics. I want to, again, let you know that we're opening the phone lines. Big props to my man, Van Eric, who's on the board, making it happen, doing the wizardry and allowing his technical prowess to assist us today, and we appreciate that so much. 323-473-3100 is the call-in number. Comment on any topic you have. Faith on the Frontline attempts, if you will, to address issues that are of specific concern to community and how communities of faith are addressing them based on our beliefs and our ethics, our understandings of how God directs us, leads us, and operates through us. We believe we are agencies of God's work, that our hands are God's hands, that our feet are God's feet, and that God does not only call us to worship in terms of Sunday morning and every day, but also our worship is in our work, in advocacy for the poor, uplift of the downtrodden, to correct some of the maladies that we see in community, to stand up against the gangster-like destructive policies that we see in municipals, governments, and corporations, and oftentimes, too many times, among our own community members who simply have chosen to utilize their talents and skills in a way that's selfish, self-serving, that puts profits before people. Faith on the Frontline exposes, addresses, and talks about those issues, and we'd like to engage with you in conversations about these and other issues that you may have concerns about. And so we want to open the phone lines, 323-473-3100, 323-473-3100, or perhaps you'd rather email me at praxis@gmail, praxis@gmail, or hit me up on Facebook, Lewis E. Logan II, on Facebook, or either tweet me at Dr. Lewis Logan. And we'll share your questions, we'll share your comments, and we'll engage you in the kind of conversation that we feel you deserve and we would love to have with you. So please feel free to call in and email or Facebook us or tweet us. Reverend Campbell, what's been sort of on your mind this week in particular?
Well, actually, I'd like to ask you a question, if I may.
Right? Okay.
Your email address, Praxis.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about Praxis, its background, because people see words they're not familiar with, and sometimes they're just an acrostic in terms of letters put together. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they are somebody's initial or what have you. Praxis. Tell us about Praxis.
I appreciate that. Now you're opening up the university today. I knew this is a professor over here. Yes, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. It's an experience that I have encountered in school as a student at Morehouse College. I encountered, I think, what I would like to call some of the forward-thinking and progressive professors of our time, and part of classes I had in social ethics and theology. Yes. What you might call liberation theology, and also and some of the offshoots of liberation theology, which what you might call Ming Jung theology. and liberation theology all have to do with seeing God in human affairs as a active participant, not as an observer that's high and lifted up as some of our more Eurocentric theologians that sort of look at God as someone who just kind of spawned the world and just left it in motion. But God prompts us to become engaged, as it were, in the work of overturning, reversing, and addressing some of the existential issues, the everyday issues that people deal with from a faith perspective. And what praxis basically is the capacity or the approach to these issues where you actually engage the issues, but you also take a moment to really reflect on what you're doing in terms of the engagement. It's a reflection on the scripture text. It's a reflection on one's understanding of the work of God on behalf of the oppressed, and it is a manner in which you not only involved in advocacy, involved in nonviolent disobedience or disobedience in particular to overturn or thwart or change a particular issue or malady, but at the same time that you learn from the engagement. You take time to reflect on it. You then reprogram yourself, and you address the issue or the matter again. So it's a constant kind of cyclical process of engagement and reflection on in history issues, not pie in the sky, but in history matters.
So would another way of saying that be that praxis is about reflective action?
It is action and learning, action
Yes.
and reflection, absolutely. And the two are mutually supportive, mutually beneficial. To act without reflecting is to not have, as it were, a vision and strategy. And to reflect without acting is simply pie in the sky theory, armchair theologians who
Yes.
don't do anything, but simply talk about what the possibilities are.
So in a sense, faith on the front line is another way of saying praxis.
Yeah,
It's about
absolutely.
being
I guess so.
able to make application of your faith,
Yep.
your understanding of your faith, your understanding of your worldview,
Yep.
but not simply seeing it from the reflective perspective, but seeing it from a point of view of action, so that if someone is reflecting on, giving thought to a particular situation, circumstance, or condition, there's another step to go, and that other step is then to move into action.
Absolutely.
Whereas on the other hand, to be acting without reflection invites you to open the door to the demonic. It invites you to be in a position where someone else can take the reins and guide your action that may be contrary to your actual interest, your actual faith, your actual ethics. So when we talk about praxis, praxis, we're talking about reflective action.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about faith on the front line, we're really talking about the manifestation
That's right.
of praxis, the manifestation of our faith in action.
That's
We
right.
take our faith and carry it to the front line. And when we're on the front line, we're on the front line not just by ourselves, but we're on the front line in the light of our faith. Is that a fair representation
That
of
is,
praxis?
and one other way in terms of scripture that just comes to mind, Holy Spirit brings to mind, is the word becomes flesh.
Yes.
That which is reflected on becomes realized in human history, and so it's tangible. It's something that impacts us. It's something we can engage. It is like our broadcast. We want to, as Faith on the Front Line, talk about how the community of faith engages real practical issues and makes a difference on behalf of people. I want to also put out to our listeners, and to our viewers, if you will, again, Praxis, Praxis at gmail.com is my email address. Actually, the real spelling is without two A's. It's only one A.
Thank
I
you.
have two A's because when I tried to secure the name of the email years ago, many years ago, it was unavailable because there's an actual educational program that's by that name, Praxis. And there were before that other persons using that nomenclature, so I had to sort of add an A, and you can't do anything with it now. I own it, I got it, and so that is my whole thing is action and reflection. No question about it. The word becoming flesh. And that's why we are broadcasting here. We are committed to it. It is our passion. As I have observed you, Reverend Campbell, it has been your passion. And that's why you're one of my mentors. Because we're like-minded and of a kindred heart and spirit. And so I am proud and thankful that you have taken time out of your busy schedule to be a part of our broadcasting here and in other times, because you sense, as I do, the need to celebrate and affirm the fact that it's not enough to just worship and clap our hands on Sunday, but we have to hit the streets Sunday afternoon to Sunday morning to engage our community and engage the powers that be, to speak truth to power, to, in the words of the prophet, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
As you say that, and certainly as a pastor, I happen to be the pastor of the Mount Gilead Missionary Baptist Church at 92nd and Normandy in Los Angeles. As a pastor, in terms of faith reflection, the whole concept of incarnation comes very much into perspective as we talk about the eternal God being concerned about his creation and demonstrating that concern in the radical act of emptying himself of his glory and enwrapping himself in human form to come and identify with creation. And so for me, authentic worship is by definition following in the footsteps of the one who I serve, which means not simply sharing in the set-apart celebration, but out of that having a sense of compulsion to be involved and make a difference. I have a friend.
Like Jeremiah is saying, it's like fire shut up in my bones. That's right.
I have a friend who likes to say, "Don't just talk about it, be about it."
That's right. Man, my mentor is on it. See, he was ill last week, but today he's coming on fired up and fed up. See, you got to watch this guy. Right?
Last year.
Absolutely. What are some of the concerns just come to mind? Even right now, that you feel that faith community has been engaged in or needs to be engaged in?
One of the things that came into our attention in one of our recent broadcasts was what's going on in terms of California and its participation in the private prison industry. Whereas California, as indeed is akin to some other states, and I don't know the listing by name, have been engaged in contracting with these private prison corporations. And a part of the contract, we think about in here that our prisons are overloaded. We've got a Supreme Court directive to do something about the inhumane conditions that come from having the prisons filled beyond their capacity. And so we think about the governor giving consideration to contracting out to private prisons to accompany that. But there's a caveat that I learned that goes with that, and that caveat is to assure the prison corporations that they will provide a certain quota of prisoners. And that becomes deceitful, to say the least, because it says you buy into a program that warrants that you criminalize folk in the community, not because they have done wrong, but because you have a financial obligation to fill somebody's prison. That's a devastating demonic concern.
It is. And it suggests that, again, that the only way certain pockets of the population are valuable is to the extent that it makes money for corporations and to the state. But it also, in my estimation, is a misappropriation of the tax dollars of the citizens of California.
Yes.
It suggests that the money that you spend that should be going for education, should be going for human services, should be going for infrastructure, should be going to maintain parks and other services that are needful for human well-being and stability, are going for incarceration.
Yes.
To limit the mobility of people, but also to really fill the coffers of a corporation, because if the beds are empty, the corporations want that money anyway.
Yes.
And so the state will pay whether the bed is filled or not. But the impetus to fill the beds is there, as you have said, based on the profit motive.
Yeah. And that becomes tragic.
Yes.
And our challenge when those kinds of issues confront us is to say, what do we do about it? Do we throw up our hands and say there's nothing that we can do about it? Or do we become engaged? Going back to this concept of praxis.
That's right.
Do we become engaged in addressing those who are involved in entering into such contracts, which means addressing the governor, addressing the attorney general, addressing our legislators, to share our sense of concern. And this is where people become important, because the masses, whether it's a matter of a telephone call or letter or a postcard, who communicate, enable those who make the decisions to recognize that the people are not happy, are not satisfied, and are in fact displeased.
Yes.
And so that was an important issue that we brought attention to.
Absolutely. I think the important thing, as you have said, is that that's what Faith on the Front Line is all about. It's about bringing you information that may shock you, but it will at least inform and hopefully engage you, because we want you to be engaged from a standpoint of having done the research, having done the background information gathering that needs to happen in order for you to address an issue from a standpoint of authority, that you speak with cogency and an urgency, because there are people whose lives, as we speak, are being decimated.
Yes.
Languishing needlessly in prisons and jails, or being profiled and stalked because of the way we look. And then it's almost like the continual process of of having people who have already offended, who are trying to better their lives, to then be targeted again for the sadistic machinery of reentry, of reincarceration rather. And so it's a vicious cycle. It's evil, and it's something that I know that a God of justice and of peace certainly stands adversely against, and calls people of faith to address in a standpoint and a position of knowing that as they do so, they do it not only on their own terms, but also with the advocacy and the efficacy of the power of God.
There's a word that is used frequently that's called recidivism, and that's that whole idea of people returning to prison. And whereas on one hand, the powers that be decry supposedly recidivism, they are caught up in a vicious cycle that makes those who were once in prison ready fruit to take advantage of. And so we have to correct this kind of posture that treats our all of our society, but particularly our young men and our young women, as fresh fruit to satisfy the coffers of those who are standing by with their hands out. And I'm not talking about those folk down at Fifth and Town and at Sixth and Crocker in the Skid Row area of Los Angeles. I'm talking about the folk who are sitting up in the high rises on Wilshire Boulevard with their hands held out and taking money literally out of the mouths of babes for monies that are transferred from the programs that would feed and service children are diverted to fill the coffers of these prison corporations, and that's a tragedy.
It is. And we have the opportunity, if we would be so bold as to make a difference, to inform yourselves, to go on the web and to gather that information that we gave out, I think it was just a couple of weeks ago, in thepublicinterest.org. In thepublicinterest.org is the website that you can go to and inform yourself about these various programs and contracts that are struck between the private prison industries. CCA is one of the corporations, and GO is another one that basically gets sweetheart deals. It's almost like the military corporations as well, like
Yes.
Halliburton and Kellogg and other corporations that basically get unfettered, no competition contracts that foster, foment, encourage, and profit from warfare. We've created a war economy that basically uses the bodies of people for corporate interests, dress it in the red, white, and blue and stripes and stars of the American iconography, and tries to bless it with a kind of a odious demonic anointing of God, if you could even put those two words into the same sentence, and then try to pass it off as some type of patriotism, when in fact it's only gets down to greed and to profit. It's not in God we trust, it's in money we trust. Yes. And while they're printing out new $100 bills this week, they're also holding back and withholding benefits from those who've already gone to fight for this fight for corporate interests. I won't say for this country, but for corporate interests, for imperialist expansionistic wars and dominance and hegemony in other countries. I know y'all gonna turn this broadcast off. It just seems so leftist. It just is what it is. And from our perspective, as we as men of faith and as people of faith look at the atrocities that we see over and over again how Scripture says that the love of money is the root. Not money, but the love of it is the root, the very cause of the evil that we see. Wherever there's disparity, wherever there's hunger, wherever there's destruction, wherever there's even drug addiction that has decimated our communities, it is the love of money that is the root of these evils.
There's another issue that I want to share, okay. And at this point I want to talk either to our young men and young women or parents of young men mm-hmm. and young women. One of the tragedies that confronted Los Angeles confronted this nation is the escape of the manufacturing industry. Mm-hmm. And as a result, there's such a high rise in terms of unemployment. Mm-hmm. But there's something coming down the pike that's already beginning to happen that we need to be aware of. Los Angeles is in the process of moving into a new phase of construction. Mm-hmm. There are new buildings mm-hmm. and various construction projects coming down the line. Right. And working with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California and the president and CEO, Pastor William Smart, mm-hmm. we've been engaged in conversation with some of the persons who affect the hiring process. Mm-hmm. And we've learned, particularly in terms of the construction industry, that employment opportunities come through its process, through apprenticeships, etc., yes. and there are tremendous opportunities, but it's needful for persons to be able to pass certain type of test in order to do it. Being able to pass the math test and the yes. reading test. And so I want to say a word to the young people who may be listening, mm-hmm. and certainly to the parents, to give focus to the education of our children, mm-hmm. and to get in behind them and encourage them to gain mastery mm-hmm. of their subjects, particularly the old-fashioned reading and writing and arithmetic and the technology that's mm-hmm. being taught. Sure. And at the same time, I said, we know that there are concerns that we have about much that happens in our education systems. However, our concern must not be offset by any failings in our educational system, because our concern must be about our children That's and right. our children's future. That's right. I came out of high school and into college in the 60s, and one of the expressions that was used to drive us forward during that time was by any means necessary. I want to reapply that as parents to determine that you're going to see to it that your children learn their basic literacy skills, their basic mathematical skills by any means necessary. You don't let the failings of a school system or anybody else prevent you from enabling your children.
That's right.
To gain mastery. If you've got to invest time, if you've got to get tutors, if you've got to get an older brother or sister or somebody in the neighborhood or somebody in the church who has some ability, speak up. Don't sit back and knowing that your child is not doing well and just lament that they're not doing well and not take advantage of the fact that there may be somebody sitting on the next pew with you. There may be somebody around the corner from you. There may be a neighbor. There may be a cousin. There may be an aunt who has ability to help your child gain command of their studies. And so I want to encourage you to do it. This is urgent. This is absolutely urgent. And we cannot leave it to somebody else. We've got to take the initiative to make a positive difference from our children because we love our children.
That's right.
And they are our future.
They are our future and our today. Hold that point. We're going to take a brief break, give again some props to our sponsors, and we'll be right back, Faith on the Frontline family. I want to encourage you again to please call 323-473-3100 or tweet me at Dr. Lewis Logan or Facebook me at Lewis E. Logan II. Or email me, praxis@gmail, praxis@gmail.com. We'll be right back giving props to our sponsors. Bless you.
If you're like me, it's lunchtime. And I want to thank our sponsors of the Faith on Frontline radio broadcast in the form of Uncle Daryl's Cajun Cuisine at 2560 Lincoln Boulevard, Marina Del Rey. And also Doolin's on Crenshaw, that soul food restaurant owned by Greg Doolin, my good friend and brother, 4859 Crenshaw Boulevard, right here in Los Angeles, California. We want to thank them for being our special sponsors for Faith on the Front Line. I want to encourage all my Faith on the Front Line listeners, if you're hungry, if you want seafood, Uncle Daryl's Cajun Cuisine is the place to go right there at 2560 Lincoln Boulevard on the corner of Lincoln and Washington Boulevard. And if you want some soul food and you know you're not on a diet but need to be, but you're willing to skip it just for a quick second, I'd encourage you to go to Doolin's right there on Crenshaw Boulevard, 4859. Greg will take care of you. His wonderful staff will smile at you and they will pile it on. I'm telling you, it's ridiculous. Good food, good cuisine. Thank you for being our sponsors. Faith on the Frontline family, go and support Uncle Daryl's and Doolin's. Thank you so much. Faith on the Frontline listeners, this is Dr. Lewis Logan, your executive producer, giving thanks and props to one of our sponsors, United We Ship, 877-229-0577. That's 877-229-0577. Any shipping logistical needs you may have, whether it's a small letter or a larger parcel or whatever it is you need, Michelle Israel and the professional staff of United We Ship will take care of all of your shipping needs. They're going toe-to-toe with the big boys, UPS and FedEx, and they're going to make it happen nationwide through their network of shipping logistics capacity. They are sponsors of Faith on the Frontline, and I highly recommend that you call Michelle Israel at 877-229-0577 for any of your shipping needs. They are special sponsors of Faith on the Frontline. He stepped out on faith, and let's step up and support him. Thank you.
Hi, this is Dawn Christie inviting you to join me every Friday, 1 p.m. Pacific, for my all-new show, The Dawn Christie Show. Join me as I discuss love, spiritual readings, your purpose, why am I born, what am I here to do, So don't forget to tune in the Dawn Christie Show at 1 p.m. Pacific, exclusively on LA Talk Live. You can also catch us on iTunes Radio R&B or watch us on Ustream TV, reality radio, handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
For those of you that think that gospel music has gone too far, you think we've gotten too radical with our message. Well, I got news for you. You ain't heard nothing yet. And if you don't know, now you know. Glory, glory.
Now you know. Faith on the Front Line is on the go. Thank you for tuning in. Looking for your questions and comments. Looking for you to tweet me, email a brother, hit me up on Facebook, or email me 3praxis@gmail.com, praxis@gmail, or tweet me at Dr. Lewis Logan, or Facebook me at Louis E. Logan II. Would love to hear from you. You can always call us at 323-473-3100. My co-host and I are kind of chopping it up, and even Brother Van Eric is even trying to get a word in over here. He's a vet, and he's saying he's being disaffected by the so-called government shutdown, so to speak, which is more like a showdown or a dummy down, if you will, of one corporate-owned political party versus another corporate-owned political party, more of the same. How has this affected you, Brother Van Eric?
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be part of
this conversation
and Faith on the Front Line. It makes me feel sad that people like myself, men and women, who serve their country to help, supposedly to help this America to stay free, to be, subjected to some personal issues that two organizations have, and hopefully something will come out of this on a positive note, because as we were saying off the air, the government's been doing this for decades. And now that they're starting to be exposed, because one person, regardless of his ethnicity, is letting the American people know what's really going on behind curtains. Now,
so what you're saying is you feel like this is all against Barack Obama, President Obama, because of his ethnicity.
Well, no, he's the first president to let it be known what's going on behind the scenes, and because of that, they doing everything to discredit this person. The fact that he's black, that shouldn't have anything to do with it.
Shouldn't.
You know what I mean?
But you got to admit, it is kind of weird. That,
it's weird.
This is probably the first and only administration I know of that's had to have this kind of wrangling around the budget or the lifting of the raising of the debt ceiling. It usually happens kind of categorically and in a perfunctory way, just kind of the normal way of doing business.
Yeah.
But this particular season of government is so vicious and wow. It's,
I think the
addictive.
On one hand, there have been other times when there have been wranglings over the debt ceiling, but at this instance, it's done with a level of personal disregard and contempt.
Exactly.
And I think the reality is that the record shows that the same day he was inaugurated in his first term, there were those who were meeting that very same day to arrive at decisions that they were going to block and obstruct anything that he could do.
Oh, yeah.
And then at that point, it was the elected leaders. It was the Republican senators and members of Congress. And there could have been no other reason for that than their disaffection with his racial and ethnic identity. I think you have to put it up front, and everybody knows that.
That's the reality.
And then, in the same fashion, on the heels of his second inauguration. It was business and corporate leaders who met to come up with plans to try to erase what he'd achieved in terms of the Affordable Health Care Act. And the irony is once that information got out and they got exposed, they're trying to back away from that. So now you've got the people like the Koch brothers and Heritage trying to disavow their involvement in pressing to shut the government down. So it's not accidental, it's not incidental. It is a concerted effort, and it's being done with a match with a sense of disregard and contempt that anyone can, if they're honest, will recognize that it is significantly associated with his race and ethnic identity. It is at a level of egregiousness, of ugliness beyond what it's ever been the case before. I mean, there's always been contention between the opposite parties. Someone mentioned that when George W. Bush was was essentially appointed president by the Supreme Court. Even though the Democrats, were very disheartened with it, they still worked with him as president. And while they would criticize, they still respected him as president. But there has been an element of disrespect directed toward this president that exceeds anything that has ever happened before. You can talk about Bill Clinton being impeached. You can talk about Richard Nixon being on the verge of being impeached. But the reality is there has been nothing so vicious, and I mean literally that vicious, as what has been directed toward this president. Which brings into question the need again for people to allow the reality, if their ethics are their ethics and not just articulated principles, the need to allow those ethics to guide them in how they act. My dismay with what comes from the conservative community is so often it is detached from the broader ethics that they espouse. And
do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor and all those things. But when it comes to certain issues of social import, then those things are taken off the table. And so anyone who has a different opinion is demonized. And the justification for dismissing them as relevant and credible for conversation and human community becomes a difficult thing for them. I think it's important for us to identify the fact, furthermore, that in spite of and this goes back into kind of a faith issue, a faith matter, that they tried to demonize the Affordable Care Act and tried to mislabel it as Obamacare, that what they meant for evil has absolutely flipped around. Now that they're backing off of the contention that the government be funded, but that on the basis of the Affordable Care Act being defunded, they backed off of that and now have put on the table other issues. But I think part of what's happened too is by virtue of a brother of faith who was the chaplain for the congressional chaplain for like for the last few years. And through his prayers, this is an African-American brother. Through his prayers have been...
An admiral, in fact, in the Navy as well as chaplain.
Absolutely. Someone that they cannot simply dismiss, but has expressed an excellence in faith on the front line, if you will, and has really, through his prayers and his counsel, castigated the Congress into some type of capitulation. It's what you don't see. This brother has been praying for the Congress. He's as a matter of fact, if you listen to any of the published prayers that you'll hear that he has actually produced, you'll see that he has not bitten his tongue.
Not at all.
In reference to his contempt for the lack of congeniality, as you call it, respect, and the manner in which the houses of representation have conducted themselves in these last few months.
I think it's more than contempt. I think it's reflecting the judgment that his faith guides him to give expression to. So it becomes more than personal. I think of contempt as a personal expression. Here, I don't see it as personal, but I see it as reflecting the judgment of the ethics of his faith, confronting those who sit in a position of leadership and calling them to accountability, and a passionate commitment to accountability, and it's sort of like the wrath of God. I offer the example that if a ambulance is coming down the street to take somebody to receive emergency care, and that ambulance has its siren blaring and its lights flashing, and somebody disregards and steps out in front of it, it's going to suffer the consequences of it. And God, who is a loving God, who does everything to make things good for us, when we step over against him, it's like stepping in front of the ambulance. We suffer the consequences, and we feel it as a manifestation of the wrath of God. And so I think it comes out of that. Let me also add a different caveat. I'm not saying, and I don't think we're saying, that just because somebody disagrees with and criticizes a decision of President Obama, that person is by virtue of that racist. We're not saying that at all. You do need to be able to speak forth your sense of truth. But it's the viciousness and at this point the sense of contempt and disregard that has no grounding in that which is legitimate, valid, and authentic, that has become the point of concern. And with the history of this nation dating back to the time before the Mayflower, and coming on up through the end of slavery and then the post-Reconstruction era with Jim Crow, this nation has a history of disregard for people of color. And that's the phenomena that we're seeing, not simply criticism of an elected leader for issues you disagree with, but contempt for that leader, and that becomes a point of concern.
Sure. Let me ask you, and again, we want to give big props, and in a sense, Mr. The chaplain, Black's contention was that you had those who fought for this country being choked off at the source of resource, given the government shutdown. He wanted the chaplains reinstated and military benefits reinstated and so forth, and just basically said enough is enough. But the same is the case across the board. When you're cutting funding from schools, from Head Start, early childhood education, when you're cutting funds with people who are trying to find work but are finding it difficult to get work because of the lack of jobs, or having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. You have the working poor who, despite working 40 hours, can barely make ends meet given the cost of living. There's the sense that there has to be, as it were, a response from, or a reaction, or an action, or proactivity of our faith communities to really speak to these issues and press, as it were, just as Barry Black has done from the inside in the halls of power. Those who come for the morning prayer, whenever they pray, to really engage them in the connection between what they pray for and what they actually do as congressional leaders, to actually uphold the statute of serving their constituency in the best interest of their constituency, as opposed to the best interest of those who write checks for their campaigns and help to pay for whatever other privileges they seem to enjoy. The reality is, again, profit over people is always going to end in the people being left out and shorthanded or shortened. Again, we want to open the phone lines for those of you who would want to call in, 323-473-3100. I was looking forward to having a conversation with you. We do want to do this. Thinking perhaps during the week leading up to our broadcast, we'll begin to engage you prior to our broadcast, so that perhaps you will respond, and we'll have an open forum. You don't have to just tweet us, call us, Facebook us on Fridays, but any day during the week. I want to let you know that Faith on the Frontline is a daily walk. We walk daily, not by sight, but by faith. And if there are issues or questions, concerns, the faith community certainly wants to be involved, and I certainly want to have that kind of conversation with you. I think that the byproduct of this is not just a kind of a faint hope, but a realistic hope, if you can even put the two in the same words. It's a hope based on the reality that when we go forward and when we act on the basis of our faith, change happens. When we, for instance, see faith leaders that stand with immigrant rights efforts and initiatives, and we see that we pushed the envelope in reference to just immigration reform. And unfortunately, the bill that's been held up in the House of Representatives right now is more or less more of the same, a byproduct of, again, the criminal incarceration industry and the military industrial industry and the surveillance industry. It's a corporatized bill, but unless people of faith engage it, as has been done last week, we were downtown LA and across the country, faith leaders raised the ire of the community to see just policies and reform bills pushed through and made the order or the law of the land. Faith leaders are going to jail. There's Moral Mondays that take place every Monday in North Carolina and other cities around the country that and other states around the country that are designed for opportunities for faith leaders to put their bodies on the line. They accept the consequences of arrest, detention, and even in some cases assault from law enforcement officers because they believe that in the way of putting your body on the line, it is, again, letting the word become flesh, that suffering is a critical part of the faith tradition, that when you suffer for doing what's right, it is the catalyst for touching the consciousness, for pricking the presumptuousness of a complacency that everything is all right. As long as I'm fine, everything is okay. But it suggests that there is a common suffering of all human beings, and that if anyone can make a difference by virtue of doing something, making a phone call, making a fax, or standing up in community and in public demonstration, that is exactly what we are supposed to do. And that's exactly where we become reflective of the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so Faith on the Frontline wishes to engage that conversation with you. And we're grateful just for the opportunity to just talk about these issues, to let you know that while there is a sense that we want to lift up the name of Jesus and to lift up the name of other faith, to lift up other faith traditions, that we also want to draw a common thread, if you will, that all faith traditions believe in justice. All faith traditions believe in humanity and human dignity. All faith traditions believe in the dignity of the human family, the sacredness of the human soul. And so as we draw our commonalities, we find a pretext for working together in a interfaith context that produces a greater unity that's reflective of the diversity of our experiences and expressions of the reality of God. You know, while I am unashamedly and unabashedly a Christian pastor, a pastor who believes in the power of the Holy Spirit and who worships Jesus, I also recognize the legitimacy and the veracity of other faith traditions that, as I've already said, believe in justice, stand for the protection of human life and the sustaining quality of human community. And so in any of these issues like immigration reform or employment or mass incarceration or racial profiling or police brutality or equal opportunity or economic development, social uplift, international aid and trade for decimated, underdeveloped, or maybe more or less strategically underdeveloped countries and cultures where it may not have served the interest of certain corporations to develop certain areas for the benefit of the indigenous population, but for the profits of its own board of directors and investors. All of these are, I think, really important and critical issues that we have to face and address across the board. So we invite you to call in 323-473-3100. Tweet me at Dr. Lewis Logan. You can email me at praxis@gmail.com, praxis@gmail.com. And again, we'll collectively insist on continuing these discussions. Don't feel like, oh man, I'm at work, I wish I could do it, or I'm off and I can't make it happen, or what have you. But just know that you can email me at any time, tweet me at any time, and we will reflect your questions and your concerns on the following broadcast. We'll post up your suggestions, and if you don't mind, we'll share your initials or part of your names for those of you who are on our network. I want to give a birthday shout outs to all of our Faith on the Frontline listeners whose birthday may be today. If your birthday is next Friday or this week, I'd like to know it. Send me your name and let me know when your birthday is. We'll give you a birthday shout out because we want this to be a family of community engagement. We want to give, again, before we close, big props to our sponsors. And again, we want to thank our technical guru and the man who makes it happen, who knows how to pull the levers and push the buttons and to do the magic that makes programming in 2013 what it is. Brother Van Eric, wants to give it up for him. We'll close with our sponsors. Any closing words, Reverend Campbell?
There's a song we often sing. It says, let me live the life I sing about in my song. Mm-hmm. And correspondingly, we should cry, let me live the life I pray about in my prayers. If it's something that you pray about or sing about, then your life should reflect it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much. So, again, don't talk about it. Don't just talk about it. Don't just pray about it. Get up and do something about it. And let's talk about it as we do it, because that's what praxis is all about. We'll close with our sponsors. Thank you, Big V, Van E, Van Eric. Thank you so much. Faith on Frontline listeners and viewers, let's talk during the week, and let's chop it up next Friday, 11 a.m. right here, Faith on the Frontline. And thank you to our sponsors, as you'll hear them in just a moment. God bless.
If you're like me, it's lunchtime. And I want to thank our sponsors of the Faith on Frontline radio broadcast in the form of Uncle Darrow's Cajun Cuisine at 2560 Lincoln Boulevard, Marina Del Rey. And also Doolin's on Crenshaw, that soul food restaurant owned by Greg Doolin, my good friend and brother, 4859 Crenshaw Boulevard, right here in Los Angeles, California. We want to thank them for being our special sponsors for Faith on the Front Line. I want to encourage all my Faith on the Front Line listeners, if you're hungry, if you want seafood, Uncle Darrow's Cajun Cuisine is the place to go, right there at 2560 Lincoln Boulevard on the corner of Lincoln and Washington Boulevard. And if you want some soul food and you know you're not on a diet but need to be, but you're willing to skip it just for a quick second, I'd encourage you to go to Doolin's right there on Crenshaw Boulevard, 4859. Greg will take care of you. His wonderful staff will smile at you, and they will pile it on. I'm telling you, it's ridiculous. Good food, good cuisine. Thank you for being our sponsors. Faith on the Frontline family, go and support Uncle Darrow's and Doolin's. Thank you so much. Faith on the Frontline listeners, this is Dr. Lewis Logan, your executive producer, giving thanks and props to one of our sponsors. United We Ship, 877-229-0577. That's 877-229-0577. Any shipping logistical needs you may have, whether it's a small letter or a larger parcel or whatever it is you need, Michelle Israel and the professional staff of United We Ship will take care of all of your shipping needs. They're going toe-to-toe with the big boys, UPS and FedEx, and they're going to make it happen nationwide through their network of shipping logistics capacity. They are sponsors of Faith on the Front Line, and I highly recommend that you call Michelle Israel at 877-229-0577 for any of your shipping needs. They are special sponsors of Faith on the Front Line. He stepped out on faith, and let's step up and support him. Thank you.
Because my mind is wealthy. Wealthy. I'm speaking my dreams into existence.
Even if I was blind, I could have told you my future was bright. Even in a time when me and my mama stayed in fights, and we had no lights. From the bottom to the top, and I ain't even had no money for that flight. Abused and confused, the whole world told me I would lose. I thought love was the single most important thing I needed, until I had to double my faith.
And tell me, where does a heart go when it knows no love? When you fall down and you call out, but no one shows up. When I was searching for peace and I found the world at war. Wouldn't hurt for some sunshine, but the rain it pours. And I don't know where I'm going. It's like I'm led astray. Am I really even worth